This is Mysterious and Chilling. Tonight, prepare yourself for a journey into one of the most infamous murder cases in American history. A story of blood, whispers, and shadows. A story that continues to haunt anyone who dares to look too closely. This is not just about a crime. It is about a house, a family, and a mystery that refuses to die. Settle in, turn off the lights, and listen carefully, because some say the echoes of that night can still be heard. On a cold November evening in 1974, a young man staggered into a small bar in Amityville, New York. His name was Ronald DeFeo Jr. His face was pale, his movements frantic. He shouted for help, his voice breaking with terror. "I think my mother and father are shot." The people inside the bar didn't know what to think. At first, some thought it was a cruel joke. But when Ronald's words tumbled out again and again, trembling and incoherent, a group followed him back to his home at 112 Ocean Avenue. What they discovered inside would become one of the most horrifying crime scenes in American history. 6 bodies, each one lying face down in their beds. His father, his mother, and his 4 siblings. Children ranging from just 9 years old to 18. Each one had been shot with a .35 caliber Marlin rifle. Each one killed as they slept. But here's where the nightmare begins to twist. Neighbors swore they never heard the thunderous sound of gunfire. During the trial, the rifle was test-fired and could be heard 4 to 5 blocks away. Yet, on that night, silence. No screams, no gunshots. Only the sound of the family's dog barking in the distance. How could 6 people die, one after another, without a single cry piercing the night? The positioning of the bodies made the crime even more baffling. All of them lay neatly, face down in their beds, as if they hadn't even stirred. No signs of struggle, no attempts to escape. No drugs or sedatives were found in their systems. How could Ronald move through the house, firing again and again, without waking anyone, without them running? Some investigators believed he couldn't have acted alone. Others whispered about something darker, something beyond human explanation. Ronald DeFeo's own stories shifted constantly. Sometimes he confessed coldly. Sometimes he denied everything, and sometimes he claimed he had heard voices telling him to kill. Some say that even now, nearly half a century later, the spirits of that house have never truly slept. Locals tell stories of hearing screams or loud bangs coming from empty rooms late at night. One man, living nearby, once woke at 3 a.m. and saw a figure standing in the window of the upper floor, motionless, as if watching him. He tried to convince himself it was only a trick of shadows, but his heart raced so violently he couldn't return to sleep. The next morning, when people entered the long-abandoned house, there was no trace that anyone had been inside. Some believe the house remembers and never forgets what happened in November of 1974. Visitors sometimes report an icy chill that does not dissipate, whispers that vanish as suddenly as they appear, and an unshakable feeling of being watched, as if the walls themselves are alive, silently observing anyone who dares to enter. And perhaps, just perhaps, the house is waiting for someone else, someone who might hear the voices and listen. Long before the murders, the house at 112 Ocean Avenue already carried a strange energy. Ronald claimed he felt it from the very first night his family moved in. The sound of footsteps echoing in empty rooms, pipes banging like heavy knocks, unseen hands moving objects from one floor to another. And sometimes the voices, muffled, distant, but unmistakably human. His parents, deeply religious, filled the home with crosses and icons, believing that evil was close. But Ronald, troubled and restless, felt it most. He warned his father, time and time again, "If I stay in this house, I will kill you all." Was it the voice of his own madness, or the whisper of something ancient, buried beneath the foundation? When psychics and investigators entered the house years later, they spoke of an Indian burial ground, of an angry spirit, perhaps a chief, whose vengeance demanded blood. And indeed, blood was spilled, an entire family's worth. Among all the victims, one death stood out. The eldest daughter, Dawn. Her body told a different story. Unlike the others, her head was nearly obliterated by the blast, her death unusually brutal. Even more chilling, traces of unburnt gunpowder were found on her nightgown. Did she fire the gun herself? Was she an accomplice? Some say Ronald wasn't alone, that Dawn herself had taken part, helping him kill their parents and siblings, until Ronald turned the weapon on her. Others believe Ronald invented this version later, trying to spread the guilt. But if Dawn truly fired a shot, why wasn't her body tested for residue? Why leave that question unanswered? Perhaps because the truth was too disturbing. Ronald DeFeo was no stranger to darkness. His father was said to be abusive, physically and emotionally. He drowned his pain in drugs, fought constantly, and lived like a ticking bomb. But murder, on this scale, coldly executed, something didn't fit. When interviewed later by Hans Holzer, a well-known investigator of the paranormal, Ronald described the house in ways that unsettled even the hardened researcher. He spoke of shadows moving at night, screams with no source, objects that shifted without human touch. He said he was tormented night after night, as if the walls themselves were alive. And when asked why he killed his family, he sometimes whispered, "The house made me do it." Over the years, many tried to explain the unexplainable. Some said it was mental illness, untreated and spiraling into catastrophe. Others said it was greed. Ronald wanted his father's money, his control, his power. And then there are those who still believe in the supernatural, that the house itself breathed evil, and Ronald was merely its instrument. But the questions never stop. Why did no one hear the gunshots? Why did all 6 bodies remain still, as though paralyzed? Why did Ronald's stories change with each telling? Even after Ronald's death in 2021, the truth remains buried in silence. What we know for certain is this: the murders marked the beginning of something even stranger. When the Lutz family moved into the house a year later, they lasted only 28 days before fleeing, claiming they were terrorized by forces too terrifying to describe. Their story would ignite books, documentaries, and the infamous Amityville horror films. But here's the part that chills the bones. Several families lived in the house after the Lutzes, reporting nothing unusual at all. No screams, no shadows, no whispers. Just a house, quiet as any other. So why them? Why the DeFeos? Why Ronald? Some mediums say the spirits feed on emotion, on fear, anger, grief, that a place becomes powerful when the living give it attention. Perhaps the DeFeos, already fractured by violence and resentment, attracted something that was waiting to be fed. And perhaps Ronald, unstable and vulnerable, was the perfect vessel. Others say the house itself holds a residual haunting, a looping echo of that night. Not an intelligent spirit, but a stain, etched into the walls, the floors, the very air. Like a film that replays endlessly, trapping all who enter in its cold embrace. To this day, the Amityville murders remain one of the most unsettling crimes in American history. A case where the line between the real and the unreal blurs until you can't tell where madness ends and something darker begins. And as you listen to this story, imagine walking into that house at night. Imagine the silence, heavy and unnatural. Imagine the faint sound of footsteps above you when you know the rooms are empty. Imagine the whisper of a voice in the dark, calling your name. Would you stay? Would you believe it was only your mind? Or would you, like Ronald DeFeo, become convinced that the house itself was alive and hungry